Buckle up, because the world of urban legends is about to get a whole lot creepier. After spending countless hours delving into the darkest corners of folklore and internet lore, I've uncovered chilling tales that will leave you questioning what's real and what's merely a figment of our collective imagination. From shadowy figures lurking in the night to whispers of cursed objects, these are the most disturbing, unsettling, and downright terrifying stories that will have you sleeping with the lights on.
Silver Train. This is a true ghost train story. Locals call it the Silver Pilen. In Sweden's capital of Stockholm, legend says that passengers waiting on the platform may see a silver train slowly pull up. You must not get on it under any circumstances. The train is heading to an abandoned station in the middle of the woods. Its passengers are said to be the souls of the dead. People who get on will never return. The legend is also connected to the abandoned Kim Linge metro station, which is said to be a ghost station. Locals say that only the dead get off at Kim Linge. Some people even believe the silver train takes people to an underground station with no exit. It never returns to pick them up. At number 9 now, we have the Palace of Skifla. Located in the capital of Stockholm, ghosts have been reported in this palace for well over 200 years. Some of the stories involve people seeing mirrors and windows just shattering for no reason at all, as well as music and songs floating down the corridor with no source in sight. One notable story involves a man called Jacob von Balthasar Niik. Try saying that in a hurry. He was a former owner of the palace who was allegedly a worshipper of Satan. He disappeared one night and witnesses said he was last seen entering a black carriage being pulled by a coachman with horns and a tail. Had he sold his soul to the devil? Some people certainly think so. This is just the top of the iceberg when it comes to the creepy goings on here. The palace is now owned by Stockholm University, who use it for storage. That's probably for the best. Coming at number 8 now, we have Borgvadet Vicarage. Borgvadet is a small village with just 50 residents there, but apparently a lot of ghosts. It's actually said to have the highest number of ghosts per people anywhere in the country. Perhaps the most haunted spot is the old vicarage. Built in 1876, it seemed like a normal building for some 50 years, and then locals began reporting creepy happenings. Ghosts that are not just scary, they're also violent. Some of the ghosts have reportedly knocked people out of chairs, moved furniture around while people are sleeping, or even one case of a ghost throwing babies out of a window. If that sounds like your idea of fun, you can actually book a room there for a night, and breakfast is included if you make it to the morning. Next up at number 7 now, we have Tofteholm Herrgård. Some Swedish people proudly claim this place as the most haunted hotel, not just in Sweden, but in the whole world. Located along the edge of Lake Vikerstern, the hotel is picturesque, but comes with a very dark story attached to it. One night, a young man killed himself in one of the hotel's rooms after he was forbidden to marry the daughter of the landowner. He had a secret love affair with her for months, but her father, a very rich baron, refused to give his blessing because he was just a poor commoner. Instead, he married her off to another old baron, not too dissimilar from himself. Heartbroken, he hanged himself from the rafters of what is now room 324. While most visitors do just avoid that room, that hasn't stopped them seeing the ghost of the heartbroken man. He is said to wander through the hotel at night, shutting windows and crying out into the darkness. Coming in at number 6 now, we have Gamla Stan. In 1520, the Danish king Christian II invaded Sweden. 92 members of the Swedish royal family refused to obey the invader, and so Christian sentenced them all to death. All 92 of them were either beheaded or hanged in the main square of the old town of Stockholm known as Gamla Stan. Some people say their blood flowed across the cobblestones for months. In the red building nearby, 92 white stones came to represent the 92 Swedish nobles who died. Now, locals believe that if a single stone is removed, the ghost of one of the dead nobles will rise up and haunt the streets of Stockholm forever.
Coming into number 10, we have Old Green Eyes. I've heard of headless ghosts, but a floating set of eyes? That's pretty new to me. So Tennessee was an area of tension during the Civil War, and one particularly bloody battle in the state was fought at, I'm gonna try and pronounce it, Chickamauga. Did I get that right? Let me know, Tennessee. The battlefield is now a national park. However, if you are wandering around and think you spot a pair of green eyes peeping at you, turns out you might not be crazy. It seems that the voyeur is a Confederate soldier who met his end in the field. His body was never found, just his head, and now all that remains are his glowing green eyes. Now they're constantly watching over the field and looking out for his body. Coming in at number 9, we have Skinned Tom. Sounds like a person I don't want to meet. Tom learned how savage love can be, and he learned it the hard way. He learned it as his skin was being peeled off his body. Hip hip hurrah. Now let me explain. Back in the 1920s, a young man named Tom felt the first pricklings of love. He asked out a woman he had eyes for on a date and she said yes. They took a trip to the aptly named Lover's Lane in East Tennessee where the pair kissed. And more. Unbeknownst to poor Tom, his sweetheart was actually married. Her husband suspected his wife was cheating on him and tracked the pair down. When he found them lip-locked, he killed his wife in a fit of rage. He then dragged Tom from his car and skinned him alive right there on the road. Now legend has it that Tom can still be found on Lover's Lane, only as a bloodied and raw ghost carrying a knife. He's said to appear to lovers who are cheating on their significant others when they park up to smooch. Coming in at number 8, we have the White Screamer. In White Bluffs, Tennessee, you could come across something scary in the woods. It seems that urban legend has it that once upon a time a local couple had a child, only the child was hideously deformed. They locked what they saw as the abomination in the basement, feeding it daily but showing it no love. It grew. It grew some more. It grew and it grew until it was child no more and got so big and strong that it could escape into the woods. But before escaping, it killed its parents. Living feral and naked, the creature survived on pets and livestock. Indeed, locals have reported seeing a big white creature roaming the woods. Those who haven't seen it have often heard it. It seems that the creature screams a terrible high-pitched wail into the night. Coming in at number 7, we have the Witch of Concord Cemetery. Concord Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in Coffee County and is well known to be haunted by a number of ghosts. Now the most famous is said to be Sadie Baker. Sadie was thought to have been burned at the stake by her community in the early 19th century for fear of being a witch. Honestly, how horrible. Now, in order to keep ill wishes from the ghost away, locals are said to leave coins by her grave as an apology. If you don't make a money offering, it's said that she will haunt you in the graveyard. If you're feeling light of coin, maybe just don't go into a cemetery at night. Suggestion. Coming in at number 6, we have the Hell Tunnel. In Kingsport, Tennessee, you can find the Sensbow Tunnel, built by the Sensbow family and the government in order to allow traffic to pass. Legend has it that the tunnel was the scene of a grisly murder, the murder of none other than the daughter of the Sensbow family. It seems a robbery had gone very wrong and the intruder had stolen away a baby so that he was not shot at. He then dumped the baby in the tunnel and sadly it died. Now in the 1950s and 60s, rumours of the hauntings were strong. There were even rumours that more people had been murdered there. Locals who live near the tunnel warn people to stay away as the site has regularly been used for satanic rituals. Those who have been brave enough to venture through have said that they've heard a baby's cry and the shrieks of a woman.
Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Skog Rat. In ancient Swedish folklore, the Skog Rat are forest spirits. From the front, they look like a beautiful woman, but from the back, they resemble a tree trunk. There are stories of men who were entranced by these spirits without ever seeing their true form from the back. The Skog Rat wear the men down over days and weeks, draining them until they are hopeless, playing on their temptations, their fears and fantasies. If they manage to outsmart the spirit, the men will see their true form from behind and the Skog Rat will disappear forever. If they do not, they are carried off into the woods at their weakest, never to be seen again. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Millingar. These are said to be the undead corpses of ghosts of infants murdered by their mothers. They haunt the places where they were buried with cries that pierce the night air. Why do they cry? Well, they want you to give them a name. They were often babies that were said to be killed before receiving a name, and now that's all they want. They'll ask you to carry them to hallowed ground to be buried. They then grow in size as you get closer. There have been stories of these undead babies asking people for other tasks on the road at night. If they don't perform the tasks, the person will often return home to find a member of their family has been killed, often in the same theme as the original request. I will go into some of the details I saw, but they really are gruesome. All you guys need to know is that they are zombie babies. Not two words you want to hear together. Coming at number 3 now, we have the Niik. Also known as the Nokken or Niiken, this is a mysterious water creature that always crops up in Scandinavian folklore. In Swedish tradition, the Niik lives in freshwater lakes and deep ponds. They are shapeshifters and will often transform into a handsome young man. They then trick women into jumping into the water before drowning them. There are also other versions versions of the legend that involve him changing into a white horse to let children ride on his back before jumping into his pond to drown them too. Some people believe the only way to save yourself is to throw metal in the water, something like a needle or an iron cross. Next up at number 2 now we have Stockholm's Royal Palace. As you might expect from a palace, this place is huge. Many of its 1,400 rooms come with some of Sweden's most famous ghost stories. Among them is the White Lady. Her name in real life was Vita Frun. She is said to appear anytime a member of Sweden's royal family dies. King Oscar once wrote that she is tall, wears a long white dress with a white veil and dark gloves. She wanders the rooms and hallways clutching a ring of keys which jangle and echo in the night. In 1971, Princess Eugenie saw the White Lady 3 days before the death of Queen Louise. Over half a century before that, she was also said to appear as Princess Margaret lay dying. Despite not actually being dead yet, a guard saw the White Lady standing on the roof of the palace, keys in hand. 2 hours later, the princess was dead. And finally, number 1 now, we have Holm Castle. This is another castle in southern Sweden known for its high concentration of ghosts. Perhaps the most famous is King Frederick II, who is said to wander the halls at night searching for his long lost love who he never married. Then there are 3 ladies. In previous urban legend videos, you guys may have heard me talk about a castle or a house with the White Lady or the Black Lady or maybe the Grey Lady ghost, things like that. Well, how about all 3 of them? That's right. Visitors to Holm Castle have reported 3 separate ghost ladies. Some even say they compete for each other's territory. Another regular on the scene is said to be the Grey Monk, who was murdered in the castle in the 1500s and now occasionally helps staff carry heavy items up the stairs from the cellars. Is that not the most helpful ghost you've ever heard of? I say all ghosts should be put to work. Just kidding. Let them do their thing.
Coming into number 5, we have the Body Farm. Rumours have been circulating about a macabre scientific experiment in Knoxville, Tennessee. Locals wondered what a strip of private land was being used for, with hearsay declaring it a body farm. Well, actually, apparently it's true. Owned by the University of Tennessee, it seems that the Body Farm is a place where dead bodies are studied in various environments to see how they decompose. Some are simply left on the ground to rot, some are submerged in water, some are left in hot rooms. It goes to help future forensic scientists understand crime scenes better, and I guess that's a good thing, but honestly, how ghoulish. Coming in at number 4, we have the Headless Signal Man. Chapel Hill is home to a very strange mystery indeed. It seems that the area, especially around the railroad track, is home to some weird unexplained lights. Legend has it that one night a man was walking home along the track, holding a lantern to light his way. For some reason, he never heard the whistle and scream of the train as it came up behind him. Now the train driver tried to stop, but it was too late. The man was mown down. The lamp he was holding was reportedly never found, but can be seen today as he watches each train go by. Other versions of the story say that a headless signalman wanders up and down the track at night. Whatever the story, the lights are topic of frequent discussion amongst locals. Coming into number 3, we have the cursed bride of Rotherwood Mansion. Rowena Ross's life was inexplicably plagued with tragedy. Despite being the daughter of a successful plantation owner and living in a mansion in Kingsport, she seemed to attract terrible luck. Like a lot of young girls, she fell in love, and actually she was lucky enough to be loved back. Sadly though, on the day of her wedding, her husband died in a freak boating accident. She married again and he too died, this one of yellow fever. Fearful that she was cursed, she did marry a 3rd time, but she was worried. Now this time, her husband didn't die, but her only daughter did. Absolutely destroyed by grief and a strange sense of guilt, Rowena took her own life. People claim that she still haunts the mansion today and can be spotted wearing white, walking the halls sobbing. Coming into number 2, we have The Boy in the Mirror. Pine Haven School is located in Jamestown, Tennessee, and is still a functioning elementary school. Beware though, there's a spooky tale attached to the school and an enduring urban legend of a ghost. The story goes that a group of bullies were terrorizing a young boy. Every day he would dread coming to school for fear of what they would do to him. One day they cornered him in a bathroom bathroom and shoved him hard into a mirror. Now the glass shattered and slashed his throat. The boys, bullies as they were, did not intend to murder him. They panicked and decided to bury his body under the school's floorboards, where he was eventually found. Now it seems that the spirit of the young boy still haunts the school today. If you're ever in the building, you should avoid looking in the mirror for too long, as you may just see a sad little boy staring back at you. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the legend of the Bell Witch. This is Tennessee's most famous urban legend and one of the most well-known ghost stories in the state. The legend of the Bell Witch goes as follows. In 1817, a cruel presence began haunting John Bell and his family at their home in Robertsons County. They had lived on the property for 13 peaceful years, but it all changed. They began seeing strange animals, hearing knocking sounds, hearing chains being dragged, and hearing weird guttural gurglings. This all went on for a year, and John Bell finally confided in his neighbours. A committee was formed to investigate what TF was actually happening. It seems that the witch began communicating with the crowds that formed to see what was going on. Their energy seemed to feed her and spur her on. Indeed, many say they spoke to the witch. It seems she knew details of the past and future, and she told those who asked that her goal was to kill John Bell and to make sure that his daughter did not marry a neighbour. John Bell died after a long illness in 1920, and eventually his daughter's marriage was called off. In 1821, declaring her work done for now, the witch said that she would leave for 7 years and then return, which she did. She came back to talk with Bell's son, saying that there was a reason his dad had to die, but she never disclosed her motives. She then fled again, saying she'd be back in 107 years, which would have been in 1935. Now, it is undocumented whether or not she did come back, but people still talk about the legend today.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Grunch. This one comes from Louisiana. In the early days of New Orleans, there was a road called Grunch Road that went deep into the swampy woods before coming to a dead end. That is where the Grunch people lived, a strange hybrid of albinos and dwarves, forced away from society and made to live in their own community. As the years went by, people started to doubt the story's authenticity, but it sparked up again when people started disappearing down Grunch Road. Nearby farmers reported their animals missing or finding them dead and drained of blood. Many locals now refuse to head down Grunch Road for fear of meeting the same fate. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Stull Cemetery. To those that know the story, Stull Cemetery in Kansas is better known as the doorway to hell. Legend says that the devil himself chose the cemetery as his entrance from the underworld to our own. Now it's said that a tree once stood in the cemetery and an old tombstone there was inscribed with the word witch. The tree was used to hang condemned witches back in the day who were put to death by the locals. The tombstone apparently marks the burial spot of Satan's own child, a creature born deformed and covered in wolf hair. In modern times, the legend has continued with reports of the ground catching fire in random spots. Pope John Paul II was said to divert his private plane around the cemetery because it was so tainted by evil. Now whether or not you believe all of that, there's plenty of videos on YouTube to check out if you're interested, and I find them quite creepy. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Knock Knock Road. This one is for all of you guys watching that get very creeped out by little girl ghosts. I think they're the worst kind of ghost. Strasburg Road near Detroit has a disturbing tale of murder attached to it. Legend says that a little girl was killed on the road in the 1940s by a hit and run driver. Ever since then, people have reported the same story. They stop at a traffic light and see on the side of the road a young girl standing, just standing and staring right into your car. Whether they freeze or then try to speak to her, she slowly walks forward to the car and stares at you with deep set hollow eyes. She scans your face to try and find her killer and get her revenge. I guess you better hope you just don't look like the killer. At number 7 now, we have the Charman. This story goes that in 1948 a wildfire swept across Ojai, California. The flames consumed a cabin where a man lived with his son. He was burned alive, but the son survived, just barely though. When the authorities arrived, they found a shocking scene. The father had been flayed alive. His skin had been removed from his body and peeled off. His body was just hanging from a nearby tree. The police then searched for the perpetrator. They heard a wheezing sound from a nearby bush, and then suddenly the son just bolted out of it. The overpowering smell of him stunned the officers, and in that moment the boy ran into the trees and then escaped into the hills. In the years since then, many locals have said they've seen the Charman in the woods, horribly disfigured by his burns and tormented by his past. He's said to creep up on the tents of innocent innocent campers in the hills waiting for them to fall asleep. Coming at number 6 now, we have Hell's Gate Bridge. This one comes from Oxford, Alabama. The story goes that in the 1950s, a young couple crashed their car off the side of this bridge and drowned. Now, some locals believe you cross the bridge at your own peril. One story is that if you drive your car out to the middle of the bridge and then turn off all the lights, the couple will appear in your car just sitting behind you. When you turn around, they'll be gone, leaving a wet seat behind. The other story is that if you drive over the bridge and then look over your shoulder about halfway through, the scenery behind you turns into a portal to hell, just spouting fire and flames. Now, whether or not you believe all of this, it's enough for some people to just look for a different way to cross the river. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Black Ghost of the Blue Mountains. If you ever head through Victoria Pass on Australia's Great Western Highway, keep an eye out at night. For more than a century now, truckers have reported seeing the ghost of a child bride called Carolyn Collette. She was beaten to death by her ex-boyfriend John Walsh in 1842 out there in the pass. Now they say her tortured soul haunts those who pass by on a dark, cold night. It's claimed that the colder the night, the better. When black ice covers the road, threatening to spin vehicles down to their doom, everyone is forced to slow down. Once everyone is slow, Caroline is said to approach, ready to seek vengeance for her gruesome death. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Burning Airman. During World War II, an Australian bomber plane crashed on the outskirts of Canberra, killing all 4 on board. It would become known as the Canberra Air Disaster. Years later, people in the area started reporting strange encounters in the woods. They said unearthly lights could be seen near the old crash site. Others heard the droning noise of a plane followed by a loud bang. Then things got weirder. A teenage girl once ran screaming from the forest, saying that she was being followed by a long dead airman. She said he was covered in fire and that he followed her to the edge of the forest. More people began to report the same thing, horrific encounters that left people traumatized. The stories have been enough to turn some people away from the forest forever for fear of seeing this burning airman stalking them through the trees. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Kelly. This is a very creepy one that was shared on Reddit. User Puppy2010 said that they have relatives in the northern beaches area of Australia on the country's east coast. There, locals tell tales of a girl called Kelly who would appear in people's cars near Oxford Falls if they were travelling alone past midnight. She is said to be the spirit of a girl who died in a car crash there in the 1970s and has haunted the road ever since. For me though, the scariest part of the story is that if you don't tell Kelly to get out of the car, she will take control of the car. For those who believe in the tale of Kelly, they worry for the travellers who have never heard this story before and don't know to tell her to get out of the car. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Orchard Hills Mafia House. This is a huge white mansion found out in Greater Sydney. You might say it was quite beautiful, if not for the scary stories attached to it. For some ghost hunters, no place in Sydney has more spirits than the Orchard Hills Mafia House. Lights are said to just flash off and on even when the building is empty. From the outside, people have seen creepy shadows flickering behind the curtains. Some people even claim that these shadows come outside and approach visitors, chasing them down the driveway with demonic grins on their faces. Why are there so many spirits said to live there? Well, that goes back to the building's name. It's called the Mafia House because it was said to be owned by members of a local mafia group. They were rumoured to routinely execute informants and snitches in one of the upstairs rooms. Between the murderous gangs and the spirits of their victims, many people choose to stay well clear of the big white mansion. Coming in at number 6 now, we have the Hawkesbury River Monster. In a lot of these urban legends videos, we've discussed creatures that bear a strange resemblance to the Loch Ness Monster. Well, perhaps this is Australia's version. The Hawkesbury River Monster is said to be a snake-like creature with a long neck, a large body and 2 sets of flippers with an eel-like tail. Locals tell fearsome tales of the beast and claim that they have proof to back it up. People point to the huge slide marks that keep appearing on the riverbanks or the crushed and abandoned boats with no owners in sight. Some say this is not a modern phenomena either, and that the monster is depicted in the ancient Aboriginal art of that area. Moving on to number 5 now, we have 100 Steps Cemetery. This is located in the town of Brazil in Indiana. Interesting name for a town, and the cemetery is even more interesting. It's been used for at least 150 years, and in that time it's gained quite a sinister reputation for a ghostly undertaker. The story goes that as you walk up the many steps to the top of the cemetery, you must count each and every step. When When you reach the top, you must turn towards the open field, and then the ghost of the cemetery's first undertaker will appear. Without saying anything, he will then reveal your own death to you in a vision. Straight away, you must proceed back down the steps and count each one again. If the number is different to the one that you counted on the way up, the vision was true. An added bonus is that if anyone tries to cheat and climb up or down without using the steps, a ghostly hand will push them to the ground, leaving a red imprint on their back for days as a mark of the devil. Definitely not a place to go for just a Sunday walk then. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Goat Man of Pope Lick. I love my job because I get to say sentences like that. This is an old Kentucky urban legend about a hideous being who roams the woods across that state. Those who have seen him describe the Goat Man as having dark fur, pale skin, goat legs and twisted horns. Some people say he was an escaped circus freak, others say he was a farmer who tortured goats for Satan. Satan then repaid him by turning him into a tortured goat himself. The Goat Man is said to hide under the rusty bridge that crosses Pope Lick Creek in Louisville. Legend says he lures people onto the train tracks there and then takes pleasure in them being hit by oncoming trains. Please don't go looking for this one though, guys. In 2016, a woman actually fell to her death from the bridge while looking for the Goat Man. At number 3 now, we have Slaughterhouse Canyon. With a name like that, you know it's not going to be a pretty story. During the 1800s gold rush, a family lived in the canyon there in a little wooden shack. Every day was the same. The husband would set off into the mountains to search for gold and food for his family. Then one day he just didn't come back, presumably injured or killed by animals, the mountain, or even other humans. His wife waited for her husband for weeks until the whole family began to starve. Driven mad with the hunger and her children's cries, she put on her wedding dress, picked up a knife and murdered her children, throwing them into the river and then weeping until starvation killed her too. Legend says that if you visit the canyon today, you can still hear the mother's painful cries. Alright, next up at number 2 now, we have the Black Angel. This statue looks very creepy as it is. An old, worn, corroded angel staring down over Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City. Her sinister appearance has helped spawn a number of different legends around her. One of them says that a pregnant woman should never walk under her lest they want to lose their unborn child. Another says that if you kiss or perhaps even just touch the statue, you'll be dead within 6 months. This is the kind of story that scares everyone off. Whether or not you believe in curses, it's just not even worth thinking about. And finally, number 1 now, we have Cropsey. Many New Yorkers know the story of Cropsey, the boogeyman of Staten Island. Legend says that he was an escaped patient from a mental asylum who went on a murderous rampage. He had a hook for a hand, which he would then use to drag children back to the abandoned ruins of Seaview Hospital. Pretty creepy stuff, but here's where it gets really scary. Many parents would tell this story to their kids to scare them into being cautious about strangers, even if they didn't really believe the story themselves. But then in the 1970s, a real killer called Andre Rand really did start hunting children in a very similar way. Was he using the Cropsey legend as cover? Either way, people now take the legend a lot more seriously. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Hands of Goodna Cemetery. Located on the outskirts of Brisbane, Goodna Cemetery doesn't look to be out of the ordinary at first. Those who visit it though do so because they have heard the stories of what goes on there after dark. According to local legend, there is some sort of force in the cemetery. People describe it differently, but one thing they all agree on is that this force does not like visitors. At night, people feel invisible hands punching and scratching them. It's not just a light tap either. People say you'd know if the hands touch you. One particularly scary story involves a local man who once tried to flee the cemetery in his car, but the car just wouldn't start. He spent the night huddled in his car trying to ignore the strange noises outside. The next morning, he stepped out and found long scratch marks all the way down the side of his car. Something had been trying to get in and get him. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Schneiders Alley. In the early 20th century, Dr. Schneider lived in Clifton Manor with his wife and child. Their lives were quite uneventful until one day when tragedy struck. Both the doctor's wife and child died in an accident. The doctor spiraled into madness. At first, it was just his personal life that was affected, but then it began to bleed into his work. He would take his patients to a little log cabin near his house where he performed surgical experiments on them without anesthetic. The house saw him mutilate countless people. The locals say that in the years since then, they've seen his disfigured patients wandering the hills around the house and lurking in the alley. At night, distant screams can be heard from those still reliving their operations. Some brave soul visit the house to try and catch their sounds. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Satanist Cult. The Kings Park in Perth draws in many visitors during the day, but at night it plays host to all kinds of spooky legends. One of this is the Satanic Cult. It's said that on certain nights a secret group of devil worshippers descend upon the park where they perform strange rituals. Occult symbols are drawn, effigies are burnt, and all kinds of demonic behaviour takes place upon the grassy slopes there. Some even say that human sacrifices happen there. This legend has only been fueled by the reports of local homeless men going missing after they visit the park. People believe that sleeping in the park after dark is inviting yourself to be killed in the name of the demons that the cult worships. Next up at number 2 now we have the Maryfield Station. In the southwest suburb of Sydney lies a train station with a grisly secret. When the last train leaves Maryfield Station and the platform is totally empty, a faint cry can be heard in the breeze. Believers say the station is haunted. For those that find the crying scary to hear, things only get worse. Some say the crying eventually stops and then, after a short pause, it turns to blood-curdling screams of anguish. On some occasions, people even see the ghost itself, a teenage girl roaming the platform with dark blood covering her face. She cries and cries, then screams and screams. For me though, the creepiest part is that sometimes she stares right at you. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Min Lights. Those who have ventured to Eastern Australia's outback will often return with tales of the Min Lights. On some nights, burning lights are said to appear in the distance but never get closer. They keep pace alongside the car but never get any nearer, almost as if it was watching you. Some people believe that if you leave your car, the lights will stalk you through the Australian outback. But hey, don't take my word for it. Unlike many of the other ones we've talked about on our list, there has been documented cases of the Min Lights. You can find footage on YouTube filmed by locals. In 2003, a report suggested that the lights are just a trick of the light and appear under certain conditions. Others believe this only deepens the conspiracy. They say the government is trying to shake people off the trail and not discover the true nature of the Min Lights. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the corpse train. Now, according to London folklore, in the early 1900s there was a train that ran underneath the city and it was only for dead people. Back then, London's hospitals and morgues were struggling to deal with the vast amount of people that were dying from poverty and disease. They decided to transport the bodies out of the city but knew that they couldn't do it overground without disturbing a lot of people. So they used an existing train line to load the bodies onto. The train ran just the other side of a wall from the normal daily service, where unsuspecting Londoners were getting on and off their trains unaware of the nearby bodies. Next up at number 9 now, we have the suicide pool. This one comes from Epping Forest near Essex. The story goes that years ago, a young couple in love were followed to a pond in the forest by the girl's father. When the couple finally embraced, the father leapt from the trees to confront the boy. The fight got out of hand and the father ended up killing the boy in a rage at the edge of the pool. The waters then turned black. Wildlife that was touching the water died instantly. In the years that followed, bodies started to appear in the water. First it was an old woman, then a young one with her young child beside her. They say the pool drew them into their death and that the pool is still out there in the forest somewhere waiting for its next victim. Next up at number 8 now, we have Annie. This one comes from Edinburgh, Scotland. In the old town there lies a street known as Mary King's Close. It's steeped in myths and legends of hauntings and murders. In 1990, a psychic called Aiko Gibo visited and felt a small hand touch hers. She said that she then made contact with the spirit of a dead child called Annie who had died in a plague hundreds of years ago and had lost her doll. The psychic then went to a nearby shop and brought back a Barbie doll for her. Now since then, visitors leave dolls for Annie and a mountain of them has built up in the dark. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Faceless Woman. This one comes from the borough of Barking in London. There you can find Beacon Tree Station, home to the Faceless Woman. The most famous sighting of her happened in 1992. A station supervisor reported that on one night he heard the handle of his office door rattle. Outside on the platform stood a woman. She had blonde hair, she wore a very pale dress and just stared into the distance. The supervisor approached her, but as he reached out, she turned to him only to reveal she had no face, just darkness where there should be one. Local ghost hunters claim that she is the victim of a train crash that happened there in 1958 which killed 10 people. At number 6 now we have the Beast. England's Hackney Marshes is known for its sprawling woodland and boggy reed marshes often covered in swirling fog, the perfect setting for this urban legend. The story goes that in 1980, 2 bear carcasses were found in the river. They had been decapitated. People started speculating about who or what could cut a bear's head clean off its shoulders. Then a year later, 4 boys were taking a walk along the marsh one winter morning when they saw it through the trees. They described it as a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. As soon as it saw them, it reared up on its back legs and let out a deafening roar. The boys ran, but the story remains always in the back of people's minds as they trudged through the marsh. We're returning now to the London Underground. Starting off at number 10 now we have Cressy. Cressy is said to be a mysterious, eel-like creature that lurks in the waters of Crescent Lake in Newfoundland and Labrador. Stories of Cressy date back to native Canadian legends which refer to it as the pond devil or swimming demon. Their fears were also held by European settlers who arrived at the lake during the early 20th century. Since then there have been dozens of sightings of Cressy, with one report saying it could be as much as 15 feet long. Next up at number 9 now we have the St. Louis Ghost Train. In the town of St. Louis in Saskatchewan lies the village of St. Louis. There you can find an old abandoned train track. Now many of the locals there have reported seeing strange floating lights moving along the train track during the night. Others have said that a ghost train will appear on the track looking just like the ones from the 19th century. Another story is that the ghost of a workman who died during the track's construction will appear at night. At number 8 now we have the Forbidden Plateau. This plateau in Western Canada has long been regarded as a mysterious place. The native Canadians would hide their families in the forested plateau during wars with other tribes. One day the warriors returned to find their family had disappeared. They believe that evil spirits took them away and they vowed to never step foot there again, earning it the name of the Forbidden Plateau. Many people have taken this story to heart and stay clear of the eerie presence there. Next up at number 7 now we have Young Teaser. This was an American ship that was destroyed in the War of 1812. It was wrecked in Nova Scotia where some people believe its ghost can still be seen today. People swear they have seen the Teaser light, a fiery glow of a flaming ship near the site of the explosion. Accounts began in the late 19th century and since then many people have said that the ship appears on the 27th of June, the day it sank. Others have gone even further and said the ship also holds the ghosts of the sailors who died in the explosion, forced to relive their deaths forever. At number 6 now we have Christy Mansion. It's now Regis College in Toronto, but Christy Mansion used to be the home of William Mellis Christie, a successful businessman in the city. His son Robert inherited the mansion and set up a secret chamber for his mistress. She lived there for many years until Robert's affections for her began to wane. Eventually she was said to have hung herself in room 29. Ever since then people have said the room is cursed. Legend says that if you enter room 29 by yourself at night, the door will swing shut by itself and you'll be trapped there forever, just like the ghost of the mistress. Move for our number 5 with The Crying Girl. On November 18th, 1987, a match was dropped on an escalator at London's King Cross station. A fire quickly spread into the nearby ticket office, which resulted in the death of 31 people. In the years since then, passengers have reported seeing a girl who died around the station. She has long brown hair, wears jeans and a t-shirt, and is always crying. Some people have even reported hearing her sobs while smelling smoke coming out from the escalators. Back to Scotland now for our number 4 with Sony Bean. This is the gruesome tale of Alexander Sony Bean, a man who was said to be the head of a Scottish clan of cannibals in medieval times. According to legend, the group was made up of his wife, their 14 children and 32 grandchildren, some of whom were born through incest. They lived in a cave by the water and would ambush people on the road at night. They would bring their bodies back to the cave to then dismember and eat them. Any leftovers were pickled in a jar for later. When King James VI of Scotland eventually heard of these murders, he led a manhunt to capture them. The clan was caught and then executed. Some people say you can still find the cave along the Benane Head area of Scotland. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Cain Hill. Some say this is one of the most haunted places in England. It was a mental asylum for over 100 years from 1882 to 1991. It built up a reputation for abandoning some of its patients, hiding them away from the public eye and never truly helping them. Some people say the patients who died left their energy behind there because of their tortured lives. The building was gutted by a mysterious fire in 2010. Perhaps the scariest stories of all are of the faces appearing by the burnt out windows. Next up at number 2 now, we have the House of the Screaming Skull. This one comes from Peggys Cove Manor in Dorset, England. The legend goes that in 1830, a man lived there called John Frederick Pinney. He had a slave that he had brought back from the Caribbean island of Nevis. The man became ill, and on his deathbed he swore he would never rest unless his body was returned home to Nevis. Pinney refused to pay for that expense, and when he died he had the man buried in the local graveyard. After that, ill fortune began to plague the village for months. Screams and cries were heard from the cemetery. At the manor house, windows rattled and doors kept slamming. The body was dug up and brought to the manor house, where today only the skull remains, where it's said to haunt the manor, but the village remains safe. And finally at number 1 now, we have the Hellhounds. Dartmoor is a vast, rocky, windy and mysterious part of England. It's popular among tourists, but everyone who goes there is aware of the legend of the Hellhounds. It's said that a pack of these ghost dogs wanders the moors at night, preying on sheep, and they're not afraid of humans. They've often been described as cat-like, but with the frame of a bear, and very fast. There have been pictures and film taken of them over the years that claim to show glimpses of these hellhounds in action. Many of the locals don't even need that though. They've heard the stories handed down from generation to generation. Some of them even say they've seen the hounds with their own 2 eyes. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Peggys Cove. On a rocky outcrop in Nova Scotia, you can find a lonely lighthouse. The story goes that in 1800, a woman named Peggy washed up on the rocks there after being shipwrecked. Tragically, her children all drowned. Peggy went on to marry one of the locals and lived on that cove. She would often walk along the rocks at night, calling out to them in her grief. One night, her husband went out with her and danced on the rocks with her to cheer her up. He lost his footing though and slipped, sending him into the rocks, which killed him. Soon after, in absolute grief, she jumped off the same rocks and ended her life. Visitors swear that on a dark, stormy night, you can see the ghost of a woman in a blue dress standing at the edge of the rocks, ready to jump. Next up at number 4 now, we have John Troyer. By all accounts, he might be the closest thing Canada has to a witch hunter. He was born into an Amish family in America before relocating to Ontario in Canada. He was a doctor who was terrified of witches. Legend says that he would stalk witches in the woods there until they led him to their den. He would then steal their broomsticks for personal transport. He would also set up actual witch traps to capture them. Now, whether or not you believe the whole broomstick or witches thing, there is evidence of John Troyer's traps, which are essentially human-sized bear traps. Coming at number 3 now, we have the Dunavan Whooper. This is a famous ghost story coming from New Brunswick and dating back to the late 19th century. According to legend, a young Irish cook called Ryan worked at a lumberjack camp. While the other lumberjacks were out one day, the boss killed Ryan. When they returned, he told them Ryan just got sick and died suddenly. They buried him some distance from the camp. However, a loud whooping sound kept them awake. The whooping got so loud that they fled the camp, convinced it was Ryan's vengeful ghost. In the years since then, many people have reported the whooping sound that can be heard in the woods as Ryan seeks vengeance on the living. Next up at number 2 now, we have the legend of Rose La Tulipe. This is a French-Canadian legend that dates back to the 18th century. There are more than 200 different versions of the legend, but they mostly share the same theme. Rose La Tulipe was a young girl who loved to dance. On the night of Mardi Gras, a stranger appeared at her house and danced with her until midnight. At that moment, he was revealed to be the devil. She tried to escape, but it was too late. The devil took Rose back to hell, where she remains to this day, dancing with her at his whim. And finally, at number 1 now, we have Oak Island. Legend says that treasure can be found on Oak Island in Nova Scotia. Since the 19th century, people have been convinced the treasure there includes the likes of Marie Antoinette's jewels and even missing Shakespeare manuscripts. A number of people have died trying to search for this treasure. The legend all began with the discovery of a large pit which seems to be man-made. It's almost 200 feet deep at one point and has been protected by booby traps which have killed a number of explorers. There are even underground channels that lead to the beach over 500 feet away. Treasure hunters are convinced that all of this must have been built to hide treasure from hunters hundreds of years ago. Alright guys, well that's another video for our Urban Legends series. What country would you like to see me do next? Thank you as always for watching. My name is Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about the creepiest glitches that Alexa has made, and yes, we're talking about the Alexa in your home. Viewer discretion advised. Don't forget to turn off your own Alexa. Click the video now and we'll see you guys in that next video.